Prince, Professor of Art, J.R.R Professor of History, Anne-Marie Wagstaff, Professor of English, and Richard Good, Professor of Geology. So I leave it to you.
Okay, I guess I'll start out tonight. I'm J.R.R Professor of History, and I've always been interested in history, and that's one of the things that actually brought me to The Lord of the Rings, and to Tolkien, and to The Hobbit, and to The Silmarillion, in that order. Because there are three major works that Tolkien published, although you wouldn't know from the movies how long they've been around. The Hobbit was published in 1938. The Lord of the Rings was finished in 1948 and published in 1954, 5, and 6. And the Silmarillion, which was written before those two, was not published until after Tolkien's death in 1977. And the reason why I'm talking about history, I have a long, long history with the Lord of the Rings. Probably, I'm the old man of the panel, I guess. I started with being at a campground in Big Basin State Park, and I found the two towers in 1963 when I was in 3rd grade. And I started reading, so I read the middle book first, which is a complete mistake, but that's okay. The reason why it was available is that American publisher named Ace was publishing the book without getting permission to do so. It thought that there was no copyright requirements in the United States. And so Tolkien found out about it, and so after Ace put their books out at only 75 cents, of course it's a little bit more than that now, they then got the official publisher to put out a paperback edition, and although these books had been around since the 1950s, suddenly they took off like wildfire. This was the middle of the 1960s, and suddenly Tolkien and his work seemed counterculture, like akin to what hippies and peaceniks were looking at. And was the ring, did it have something to do with atomic energy and war? And there was lots and lots and lots of speculation, and it just took off on college campuses in a huge way. I was in a Tolkien club when I was in college. You can just see I'm just a total Tolkien nerd, but I loved every second of it. I had posters on my walls. I had buttons that I picked up at Berkeley. You know, Berkeley, all the fun things that go on there. So I was just really enjoying it. But anyway, so what it brings me and brings my interest to this is that as you read through The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, that old history that was written before in the Silmarillion suddenly starts to peek through. You have the hobbits. If you've seen the movie, even in the movie, the hobbits and Gandalf go to Rivendell and they're talking to Elrond, and they said, well, take a look at these swords. And he opens up the swords and says, these are from Gondolin. Well, Gondolin, why mention a place that's not in the books? But it was from the Silmarillion. And stories like that start to peek out behind the curtain a little bit as it gets deeper and deeper and deeper into the history. And throughout the stories, we see old ruins. We see the ghosts in old cemeteries. We see the dead marshes. You have manuscripts, ancient maps. All of these things give you this sense of a great antiquity. And it's fascinating to be part of all of this. Now, the Silmarillion, which any of you ever read the Silmarillion? Yay, a couple people. It's not an easy read. It's not written for a general audience. It's written like the old ancient Norse sagas. So it has things like the creation of the world and how did evil come into it, and who are the elves and who are men, and where the dwarves come from, and who are the wizards, and all these things are explained in the course of 30,000 years of history. Can wear you out just thinking about it. But it's fascinating to do all this, and one thing about Tolkien is that the popular books, which were never intended to be written, Tolkien, that was not his plan. They are from the whole perspective is from the characters who know the least about the history. And so as they get the history unfolded to them, we're getting it, of course, too. And so we are, like the hobbits, we are learning about the much larger world that we're a part of. And it's fascinating to be part of this and to learn about the good and the evil and the bad choices good people sometimes make, and sometimes how good manages to win out in spite of a lot of horrible things that you may read about as you go through the books. And by the way, the Silmarillion has some really horrible stuff, like how the elves killed each other and how where orcs came from. And Sauron, of course, is only a servant of the evil one. He is not the evil one, you know. So it is Morgoth is the evil one, and Sauron's just his servant. So there's a lot more to be found there, and I encourage you to read. This is the life of books, and you'll discover a much wider world than just the films, which had to take a lot of license and cut out a lot of good stuff. So I'm excited that you're here. I hope you take this to heart and go and search out these things that maybe you've only seen in films. And I think you'll also see the excitement that my colleagues have in this as well. So thank you for coming tonight.
I came to Lord of the Rings, like Jay, a little bit backwards. I read the full series, Lord of the Rings, and years later I discovered, oh, there's another book, The Hobbit, come back to that, and that was interesting to me. I was a typical kind of introvert, like Jason would have been nerd, I guess, too. When I was a kid, I inhabited my own worlds, I made worlds. I'm a visual person, and so I created these worlds. And when I found Tolkien when I was a teenager, it was exciting because, as Jay was saying, it's such a compelling world that decades before he wrote the books, he had been working on this. He'd been working on the languages, the philology. He's been working on the flora and fauna, and the whole kind of series of, I guess you might say, the creation stories, the whole mythos of this world. And so even before I got to the books, he's, as Jay was saying, he's referring to some of these older stories that you find in the Silmarillion in these, and that was exciting to me. It was a world also, I had interests in the medieval world, the Middle Ages, and it was very much of that world. Tolkien was a Beowulf scholar, a renowned Beowulf scholar, and so that was of early medieval Europe and inhabited by the same kinds of people who were semi-nomadic, who very loosely allied kind of political entities. There weren't these overriding governments and laws that we think of today, but your oath of allegiance is what held you to your word, and if you didn't abide by that, you forfeited your life. So these kinds of things were, where a man's, honor was, clearly, brought to the fore as one of the more important aspects of living in this world, were compelling ideas. Also, with this was the kind of magic, the magic of wizards and elves and orcs, but also, the magic of the ring, the magic of, a sword, swords that had names. Elendil's sword was Narsil, or I'm trying to remember the other name he had for it. Anduril, thank you. That reflected, this cult of objects, and these were all things you didn't see, from my perspective as an artist. You didn't see these huge monuments in the stories. Other than the fortified, citadels and so on of the books. What you did see were these small treasured objects, these heirlooms that were magical in some way, passed down from generation to generation. You had the one ring to rule them all, you had the 7 rings for the elves, the 9 for the men, and so on, that all had, properties, and they were intertwined in this complicated world. As well, with its complex world, it was also a world of good and evil. And I was a young kind of budding environmentalist when I was growing up, and I was seeing this world as, and just the way Tolkien would describe it, when bad occurred, it was where evil would despoil the landscape, it would be essentially an environmental disaster allegory, right? So not only would it destroy the landscape, make all that's barren. I mean, you could smell the filth in the books and so on. But you got this sense that it also darkened the minds and the moods of the characters. And so it had this, overarching effect that the enemy was winning. Well, good was filled with light. Good was good stewardship of the land. In fact, at one point, Gandalf says to Denethor, I'm a steward too, and he describes, how his role is in helping those who need that help. And in a sense, I also saw him as a steward of the land. And even in the descriptions, when good is occurring, you smell, things smell sweet. There's beauty all around you. And you see this transformation when Saruman turns evil. He despoils his own land around his home, right? He turns to heavy industry, right? He starts manufacturing, polluting the waters, and fracking, okay, ancient tradition. But also creating a very kind of barren landscape, cutting down ancient trees and so on. And all of this is part of what brings the Ints into the action. And that's another thought. As a teenager, it was very compelling, though I know it's just completely, coincidence. But my last name is Ints, and so the Ints in the story, I thought, wow, And interestingly, too, when I was younger, I loved trees. I mean, some of the first things I was drawing were trees. I was climbing trees. I climbed every tree in the park near us. I liked hanging out in trees. That was a place where I could be above things and imagine things and see the world away. And so trees were compelling to me. And seeing these tree herders, these Ints, was, it was extraordinary. So there was these kind of unlikely elements in the story that was attractive and captured my attention, So in this complex world, the Hobbit is one of those unlikely characters. I mean, it's a halfling, right? Modest, doesn't really want to get involved. But in a sense, I thought that this was maybe Tolkien's alter ego. This was the kind of ideal world that he wanted to inhabit. I mean, think of it. 6 meals a day. Great. You live in the Shire. It's a natural, but it's a tame landscape, right? It has many gardens, homes. Where are the homes? They're underground. They're unobtrusive. They're out of the way, So that doesn't, interrupt this beautiful pastoral kind of landscape. Very much a model, I'm sure, of where he grew up. Good friends were cultivated, good inns, good beer, good tobacco, all of these things, and friendship at the core of this. I mean, you have Sam and Frodo, and that's, I think, extraordinary how that works. And finally, the ideas of these unlikely heroes with hidden powers. Not only you have, the hobbits that are made of sterner stuff, but you have Aragorn who walks around, I mean, of course, there's a little kind of poetry about how all that is gold does not glitter, and it describes him and so on. But he walks around in travel-worn clothes, and people see him as a seedy character at the beginning and all the rest. And so there's this, he carries a broken sword with him, I mean, come on, get a life. He's a wanderer, he has no home, So you feel like this character has just got all these problems, and the revelation of who this person is was extraordinarily compelling. And of course, Gandalf, traveling, always seemed to have, as Tolkien described him, rags over his clothing and so on. And you don't realize that he's the Grey Wanderer at some point. Later on, he's transformed into the white, and you see him as a complementary opposite to the evil of Sauron. I mean, the black, the black Nazgul, the Nine Fellowship, the dark, the light, and Gandalf is this person of light. But more than this, he was a quirky guy, right? I mean, Aragorn says to him, "In one thing you have not changed, dear friend, you still speak in riddles." Gandalf replies, "What, in riddles? No, for I was talking aloud to myself, a habit of the old. They choose the wisest person in the room to speak to. The long explanations needed by the young are wearying, So you get this kind of quirky, kind of fatherly figure that, is also at the core of the friendship of this group. So in a sense, these are compelling ideas drew me to the stories, and they still do. The poetry, the writing is extraordinary, and at the core, this idea of friendship from these figures that are there. Thank you.
Well, I came to the books not through what my discipline would eventually be in geology. I was junior high, high school age, all that turmoil of being a teenager, and I picked up The Hobbit. I had an older stepsister who had read it, and that's where I came across it. So I read The Hobbit first, and it was just a good story. It's got dragons, you know, 13-year-old boy, dragons. Yeah, you know, that's where I went. And then several years later, I finally read the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy. And with me, it's the people in the stories. It's the characters. They're the ones that really hit home, especially when you look at when it became popular in the 60s and 70s, civil rights movement, you've got the hippie movement, you've got all that going on. But in the Lord of the Rings, you've got a group of 9 people, characters that are thrown together to take this ring on its quest. And the 2 most unlikely of friends become strong friends as Legolas and Gimli. The dwarves and the elves absolutely hated each other. But they found a common bond in this fellowship, and they could find honor with each other. And so much so that Gimli promises to show Legolas the caves at Helm's Deep, and Legolas promises to take him back into the wood realm where dwarves don't usually go. And so you see those friendships blossoming. My favorite character in The Lord of the Rings is maybe an odd choice. There's a lot of people seem to think so. It's Boromir, the eldest son of the steward of Gondor, Denethor. His mother died when he was young. He had an overbearing father. He was looked upon to carry the stewardship of Gondor after his father passed. And Gondor at this time is waning. It has been past its prime for quite a while. And the people are dwindling, its riches are dwindling. And it's stuck in the past, it's stuck in the old. And when he goes with the quest, when he finally comes face to face with the ring, he doesn't see it as power for himself. He sees it as a way to save his people. He sees it as a way that we can fight back, we can make Gondor great again. It wasn't a personal, I have to have the ring for me, like with Gollum. It was, I can use this as a powerful tool to save my people. And at the end of the fellowship, when the fellowship breaks, and he goes off with Frodo and tries to take the ring from Frodo, when Frodo disappears and goes off to Mordor with Sam, Boromir realizes he's failed. He has failed miserably. He's failed himself, he's failed his honor, he's failed Gondor in a way that he doesn't see any way out, any chance of redemption. And then the hobbits are in trouble, and he defends Merry and Pippin with his life. And so in doing so, he spends himself in a worthy cause. He's doing something that was within his power to do. He regained his honor, he regained his place as the son of the steward of Gondor. And so that theme of failure and redemption, to me, especially with Boromir, really, really makes the books, those things make the books real to me. Every time I read them, I've read them 9 times now. I read them again over the break so I could study up for this. I did my homework. But every time I read them, I still get to the points in the book where tears still come to my eyes, where the emotions are still as real as the first time I read them. When Gandalf falls at the bridge at Khazad-dûm fighting the Balrog. One of the ones that really chokes me up every time is after the ring is destroyed and Frodo and Sam are outside Mount Doom, the lava's flowing around them, they see no way out. And Frodo says, "I'm glad you're with me here, Sam, at the end of all things." That friendship, if you ever have a friend like Sam, you have something richer than gold, because Sam was the most stalwart friend you could even possibly hope to find. And then there are quotes from the book that just have bearing on me each and still today. I travel now because I can and I want to. But that goes back to the Lord of the Rings. Frodo, as he's getting ready to flee the Shire with Pippin. The quote goes, he's quoting Bilbo. Frodo says, Bilbo always said, "It's a dangerous business, Frodo, going out of your door. You step onto the road, and if you don't keep your feet, there's no knowing where you'll be swept off to." And what we don't realize is that when you walk out your door every morning, that first step out your door, that road leads everywhere. It leads to the most imaginable places you can go to. And that path is there in front of you all the time. And you just have to let your feet get swept away. Thanks.
Well, for me, it's it's all about that road, and it's all about that journey. And I teach The Hobbit. I've been teaching The Hobbit for about on and off for 20 years now. And I open the class by singing this song, which is about that road. It's Bilbo's song, and it's the same road that Richard was just speaking of. The road goes ever on and on, down from the door where it began. Now far ahead the road has gone, and I must follow if I can, pursuing it with eager feet until it finds a broader way where many paths and errands meet, and whither then I cannot say. By the end of the semester, some of my students are willing with me, which is quite a feat. And really, the idea of the journey was what first engaged me in The Hobbit, which was the first book that I read. I grew up in Palmdale, and I've always loved books. And so spent a lot of time in libraries, but Palmdale didn't have a bookstore when I was growing up. And so when a big store called Jimco came, it had a book section. And The Hobbit was actually the first book that I ever sort of bought, or was actually bought for me by a friend who said, "You can pick any book you want," and I picked The Hobbit. And that was my senior year in high school. And then, of course, then I left on a journey, and I started learning about journeys. I flew across the country to go to college, and I was on a true journey. And then The Hobbit kept reappearing in my life about every decade. When I was living in Davis, going to graduate school, Davis was a very environmentally conscious place. And there was this solar community that decided to name all of its streets after places in The Hobbit. So I actually lived on Western S. And I have friends who still live on Bombadil Lane. So this book has a way of coming to life. I mean, when we talk about the life of books, Tolkien's work has come to life more than most, and I think that up here we represent the life of books, and particularly of Tolkien's work. But my love for Tolkien a lot is out of my respect and appreciation for what Tolkien did. Just an incredible gift to us all that was a lifetime's work. And he was, in terms of his creative process, is truly fascinating to me. When he came to write, this is the way that he actually came to write The Hobbit. He was a professor, a philologist, and a teacher of languages, of ancient languages that most people don't even speak these days, no longer spoke. They were just in ancient literatures that Tolkien taught, and that not a lot of people were interested in. he was great. He had a number of kids, and so professors didn't get paid that much at that time, and he was grading exams to make a living during the summer. And he was grading a stack of exams, and he turned a page, and it was a blank page. And on that page, he just had an impulse, and he wrote down on that page, "In a hole in the ground, there lived a hobbit." When Tolkien wrote that sentence, he had no idea what hobbits were. And he essentially wrote The Hobbit in order to find out more about what hobbits were. That was this new being then opened up a whole new world that was a bridge from all the work that he had done before, because he put that hobbit in that world that he had already created, that Jay was talking about, the Silmarillion, that with all of the myths and legends of truly a whole universe. And this universe itself was based on Tolkien's many years of scholarship as a scholar of these very ancient languages of Old Norse and Old English and Anglo-Saxon, and he knew these works and was a scholar of these works. But out of those legends and tales and myths, he had created his own mythology, in part because he knew these languages were dead or dying and that no one wanted to read them anymore. Well, he rewove them into this fabric that became a whole universe. And then this hobbit emerges into this universe and starts him on a whole new journey of his own to tell the story of the Hobbit, and of course thinking that was it. I mean, he originally told the story of the Hobbit to his children. He considered it a children's story, and then would never even have gone on from there if people hadn't loved that book so much after it was published, and sort of asked for a sequel. And when he started to write the sequel, he was himself overwhelmed and surprised by what came out, and he thought he was about to finish it, and it just kept getting larger and larger. Tolkien, it says, never met a deadline in his life. He kept promising when it would be done, and it was just never done, and no one ever thought that he would finish it. And of course, another remarkable thing about this is that in The Hobbit, when Bilbo finds the ring, that ring that's later going to become the Ring of Power, and central to the Lord of the Rings, he writes, it was a turning point in Bilbo's career, but he did not know it. Well, it wasn't just Bilbo that didn't know it. Tolkien had no idea. And this really is the beauty of the creative process. And Tolkien's ability to respond to that and go with that. But you couldn't just make that up. If he had not done all of that scholarship and all of that work for so many years and had this sort of whole mythology and this whole created world in order to place this Bilbo and then follow him on these adventures, it never would have happened. So it's sort of both the depth of scholarship and the depth of, and then the fact that he was working with these real old languages and old stories and myths and legends that he was then reworking into his own mythology. They are, in a sense, a sort of ethnic literature for England and Anglo-Saxon in a way that brings together all of these stories from the past for us. And so I am in awe of the labor of love that Tolkien brought forth, much of it fairly late in his life, and also that it was not very well respected by his colleagues, at Oxford, or he was supposed to be doing serious work, on Beowulf, and he did. He is actually one of the greatest Beowulf scholars who ever lived. However, he will be remembered not for that, but this work that many people didn't take seriously, but for Tolkien was his love. Yet at the same time, his even deeper love, as Jay was talking about earlier, was the Silmarillion and this whole world that was even deeper that no one even wanted to publish during his lifetime. So the hobbits and the Lord of the Ring ultimately raised up this whole continent like Atlantis that created this whole new genre that now people write in all of the time. But that wouldn't have been possible if Tolkien had not done what he did. He essentially created a genre that has become one of the preeminent genres of the 21st century. So I too return to his work quite frequently, but I also find it incredibly important way for students to learn about life and about journeys. I carry it with me all the time, and every time I read it, every time I go back through it, whether it's even The Hobbit, which I teach the most often, I learn something new. I mean, this is perennial wisdom at its best, and it's thank goodness for Tolkien.
All right, do we have any questions for any of our presenters? Any questions? Yes?
Sometimes I've heard a criticism that I really don't agree with, I assure you, that there was a hole in the story because when the ring was destroyed and Gandalf asked the eagles to rescue Sam and Frodo, the question popped up, well, why didn't they just bring the ring to Mount Doom by the eagles in the first place? And the counter is always like, well, then you wouldn't have had a great quest and a fantastic story and all that stuff. And I thought, that's not the right answer. So I want to give you guys a chance to have my own idea.
There actually is a animation of this online called How It Should Have Ended. And if some of you have seen that, it's fabulously funny. But you're right, it wouldn't have been a quest. There wouldn't have been any struggle. It was in struggle that we grow. I guess as human beings, and Tolkien wanted to tell that story. If you have a quick and dirty ending, and you don't have any struggle with it, nobody learns anything.
Well, and also the Eagles were a very proud race, and they were pretty much to themselves. They didn't interact with the other races of Middle-earth very often. But Gandalf and they had a special bond, and the Eagles owed Gandalf a favor. They were in his debt, and so the Eagles coming and rescuing Frodo and Sam, and where they do show up in the story, there's a reason for it. They were never strong enough bonds between men or hobbits and eagles to actually use them as a transportation system. They are a very proud race, and also it would have been problematic for eagles to fight the Nazgul while they're flying around with hobbits crawling on top of them, trying to get to Mordor. So that really wasn't a way that they could get in.
So a small favor, not a really big favor. Okay.
They were in his debt. That's about all I've been able to learn.
So you don't know what Gandalf did to get the eagles in his debt?
It is mentioned, it's talked about, I don't remember it. It's,
Well, in the film, they show him speaking to butterflies, and somehow that gets the eagles in. But actually, the eagles are the servants of Manwë, who's the highest of the angelic spirits. And basically, he's the one who sent Gandalf to Middle-earth. Gandalf is an angelic spirit from the Silmarillion. And so it's obviously, you could call upon, Gandalf's not supposed to use any force or power, so he can call on the eagles to come and save him. It would be perfectly fine.
They also play a prominent role in The Hobbit
Yes.
at the very end, so they're kind of saviors in that regard. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yes. I know you guys spoke about Norse mythology, things like that. But wasn't Tolkien Christian? He
Yes.
was? Okay.
Yes.
So did the fact that he was a Christian, did that play a part in his writings? Do you feel that it played a part in his writings?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, he believes that it played a significant part in his writing. And actually, Tolkien belonged to a writers group called the Inklings. And they all wrote a variety of different types of works. C.S. Lewis was a part of that group, and do you remember any of the other? Charles Williams. Really some very prominent people. And they would get together and read to each other their stuff, and not always like each other's stuff either. But one of the things that held them together was their religious beliefs, essentially. They didn't all have the same religion, but, they were all religious. In a time when there was much more skepticism about religion, and so they were actually caught up in a struggle sort of going on, especially among intellectuals, about whether or not intellectuals could believe in God. And that was central to what they believed that they were doing. And C.S. Lewis, who was a Protestant, and Tolkien was a Catholic, but Tolkien actually played a very important role in C.S. Lewis's conversion to Christianity. So religion was very important to both of them. They wrote about it in different ways. C.S. Lewis is much more sort of open about his Christianity and wrote more openly about Christianity, as well as his work was, more of allegorical, Christian allegory, was much closer to it, whereas Tolkien did not like allegory, did not want to see his work that way. But he also felt as if those, I probably said enough.
Thank you.
But you can also see it in the themes that are present throughout. The failure and redemption occurs. You've got the ring, which is a high temptation. Boromir was tempted. Obviously, Smeagol, who became Gollum, was sorely tempted. But you also have Frodo offers the ring to Aragorn, and Aragorn refuses. He offers the ring to Galadriel, and she's tempted, but she also refuses. And she has those words where she says, "I passed the test, and I will diminish." So those themes that you see in Christianity also show up in the works of Tolkien over and over and over again if you look for them.
Tolkien liked to point out that the act of creating a world and creating persons telling the story was a way of honoring God. As a Catholic, and remember, Catholics in England were not normal. They were very rare, and he had had some hard times in his life because of that, and his parents dying very early. And he was fascinated by the things that he loved with languages and the great elders, the Elder Edda, which was the Norse saga that he was very interested in. But he wanted to create. He wanted to honor God by creating something, and that's how he saw it. At least that's what he wrote about.
Do we have any other questions? Yes, in the back.
What is the correct way to pronounce his last name?
It's Tolkien correctly, but I was brought up saying Tolkien. I'm sorry, I just get it wrong every time. He's from South Africa. He was born in South Africa, and his mother, when she converted to Catholicism, her family threw her out. And so, but he would have had a South African name. Tolkien is correct.
I'd always heard it Tolkien.
Oh?
Yeah.
Jim has it right. I have it wrong. So. I'm reminded every time you say it.
We Americanize it and foul it up every
Yes,
time.
exactly.
We do.
So other questions? Jay, can you expand on some of the connections Tolkien made with the world of his time and the Middle Earth?
Well, when the movies came out, there was all kinds of pop psychology of trying to explain where did Tolkien's ideas come from. And one of the things that he was brought up at a time, of course, when England was the most powerful country in the world, and he was seeing, as Jim was talking about, he was seeing the destruction of the English countryside. And so a lot of his book is he's writing about flowers, and he's writing about mountains, and he's writing about trees, and he wants that world to be preserved. He doesn't want to see it go all the way of industrialization. Then he's also of that generation that went off to fight World War I. He said, all of my friends died. Think about that for just a second, how that would impact you. People that had the same love of the same things that he had and were willing to put their lives on the line because that was called doing your bit. And England was in this war and there was no end to it. And they just died. He was invalided out of the war. I mean, he was injured and was out of the war for a long time. Then in World War II, he had to see his son go off to the war. And so much of the Lord of the Rings is he's writing the stories as Anne-Marie was saying, as it's coming to him, he's writing to his son who's being stationed overseas during World War II and hearing about what the Nazis are doing. I don't think there's a direct allegory. It's just he's living in a world with all kinds of horrible things going on. And he finds a way to meet this by being creative and bringing in a world where the same kinds of choices between good and evil that are going on every day are going on at a different level, over a different subject. I don't think there's an allegory anywhere.
Suppose there's somebody here who only read or who only saw the movies, say.
That's sad. That's
And
sad.
you'd like to encourage them to read the books. What would you say to motivate them to do such a thing?
There's so much more backstory. There's so much more in the books in terms of fleshing out that world, elucidating that world behind the story within the story, in a sense, is suggested at times in the movie, but it doesn't fully, manifest itself as it does in the books. And one finds also, I think, much more a kind of, what's the word for it? The language is so much more important, I guess, in stories. That oral tradition is so much more part of it. Breaking into song and talking about the poetry, and remember the time when we were like Sam. In the movie, Sam talks about, remember when what if we're in the story and so on. And somebody asked to hear about Frodo and the Nine-Finger, so on. And in the book, he then goes on to refer to the story of Beren and Luthien, the one-handed Beren. And that's a story from the Silmarillion that I think broadens and enlarges that kind of connection that you don't get otherwise. And then sometimes the language is terrible, like, let's go hunt some orcs. Do you remember that from... But I actually found the quote where it says, where Aragorn, instead of saying, let's go hunt some orcs, has an interchange with Gimli and talking about endurance, and we can do this, but they've got such a long road ahead. And he says, with or without hope, we will follow the trail of our enemies, and woe to them if we prove the swifter. We will make such a chase that shall be counted a marvel among the three kindreds, elves, dwarves, and men. Forth the three hunters. Well, it's a little language, but updating it to let's go hunt some orcs. There's a lot of that.
One of the things about the books is that there's been 100 million readers of his books. It is one of the seminal works of the 20th and 21st centuries. And so much so that it's gone on beyond literature directly into pop culture, with the movies especially. So one of the things is join the bandwagon. It really is that good.
Yes.
And there's some continuity that's missing in the movies that you don't, the movies did an okay job, but there's some mythology and some continuity that through the books makes more sense out of the movies. I mean, there's some pivotal things that are not in the movies that you need to know.
Where's Tom Bombadil?
Yeah.
I mean, oh my gosh, he's a wonderful character. And such mystery, and he's not there.
I really loved the movies in the sense of the opportunity to visit Middle Earth.
Yeah.
But the third movie was such a disappointment because in the book, the return journey is a good part of the third volume of The Lord of the Rings. In the movie, it practically disappears, and that return journey, in terms of journeying, is very, very important. You can't just cut it off like that. And so I felt that was a terrible way to do that, to do the third book. And not at all true to Tolkien, nor true to journeying. Very sad that they did that. But still, to be able to, after reading the book so many times, visit Middle Earth and, that way, beautiful.
one other thing is that we're in a modern world, of course, and when Tolkien wrote the books, it was a world of Oxford professors and drinking beer and smoking pipes. There's no major women characters in the Hobbit. There's none, and so you notice what the film has done with the Hobbit recently.
Yeah.
And in Lord of the Rings, there's really only one major woman character, and they have added characters because you can't make a movie today without including women in it for obvious reasons. So the movies have made a little bit of an adjustment. If it was strictly from the books, probably no one would ever go see it. It's a different world. They've made it more approachable, and in that sense, the movie opens the doors for us to see this. They're not perfect, but they're better than nothing.
They are. They're better than Bakshi's animation of Lord of the Rings, which until then was the standard. Oh
That was in the early 70s.
And actually, I mean, from my perspective as a visual artist, they are a visual feast. They are extraordinary. But Peter Jackson also comes from a B-movie horror film director's background where he was really into blood and gore. And so the warfare is, is elaborated to the nth degree, and the blood and gore is quite extraordinary. But, for me, as much as anything else, the spaces in between that is what really made the story. I mean, the warfare, had its moments, but if it's 2/3 of the films, anyway.
Is there a question in the back? And then we'll go to you.
In what order do you recommend reading the books?
That's what I was gonna ask.
What order to read the books in?
Hobbit first?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hobbit's the easiest one to get to, and you can actually read it very quickly.
Yes.
It's a quick read, because it's a children's book. But then, if you want more, it's kind of like an appetizer. You
Yeah.
go for the Lord of the Rings, and as you read the Lord of the Rings, one of the things that anybody's read the Lord of the Rings knows that the third volume has appendices, like this is like a formal academic work that explains and has a history and genealogies and family trees and the histories of the previous age. Then if you can dig through all that, you love that, like I did, then you should read the Silmarillion.
Yes.
Which even though it comes before, you have enough context that starts to make sense to you. And the Silmarillion is a shortened version of what Tolkien actually wrote, because it couldn't be published. His son published it right after his death, but he had to take some liberties with it to make it publishable. So it's still good. And if you want to read more, there's even more books that explain how he wrote the Silmarillion. And believe me, it's never ending.
There's a bunch of volumes now, all of his 12 volumes of his unpublished work that have been published. But it's all kinds of different stuff.
That one is.
All right, we've got one more question, right?
Oh, I was gonna ask the same thing.
Oh, same question, was it? All right. Bob?
I wanted to ask for each of you, what thing you think is most underappreciated about Tolkien?
You can just jump in whenever.
That is a hard question.
I think, and I've actually queried my classes, and the majority of them have seen the movie and have not read. And I've mostly focused on Lord of the Rings. I mean, that complex story was really, kind of struck me in a way that The Hobbit hadn't as much. But I think the complexity of his world and his referencing this world that he created for decades before he even started to write the books, I think that is extraordinary. And when you start to see those connections, I mean, I read the Silmarillion many years later, but when I did, it was eye-opening, like, so yeah, that kind of referencing of his own history.
I would say ditto. If you like the Balrog at the end of the Lord of the Rings, well, the Silmarillion has an army of Balrogs, led by Gothmog, the Lord of the Balrogs. If you like dragons, there's only one dragon, remember, in the Hobbit. There are numerous dragons in the Silmarillion. So it's more better.
It's just the magnitude of what he did in terms of his whole lifetime of work that's underappreciated. People love whatever they encounter of him, what they don't realize is that whatever you encounter of Tolkien, part of what it appeals to us is all the depth and complexity of a whole lifetime work that went into any piece of it.
And most people are just associated with the movies, the 3 Lord of the Rings movies and then the 3 Hobbit movies. So you've got 6 movies, and that represents just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more beneath that most people won't take the time to delve into, that's really worth the time.
Well, let's give our panelists another round of applause. All right, now we'll turn to our costume contest. Whether you're here to retrieve a ring or just have a good pipe or something like that, we invite you to come up, and there are prizes. All right, I guess we'll start with you. If you can speak. So, just give us your name and who you are portraying.
Baggins.
I'm sorry, is that your name?
No, I'm the Witch King of Emerald, and my turn-ons are, fighting alongside of orcs, and turn-offs are good people.
Can I ask a favor after you're introduced, so that if you guys could turn so we can see you?
Oh yeah, just do a little turn.
Just a little turn.
Dance. Okay, how about you, your name and who you are?
My name is Valerie, and I'm a hobbit.
Valerie the Hobbit. And do the turn. How about you?
I'm Kathy Christensen, and I'm Bilbo Baggins.
Bilbo. Hello.
I'm Linda, I'm a hobbit.
Linda the Hobbit. And finally?
I'm Sue, and I am a generic with Linda.
All right. Now our panelists are going to serve as judges, and then we're going to award some prizes to... How many prizes have we got, Bob? He's counting the people and prizes. So they're going to convene. So.
All right, we've decided the Nazgul is first place. And the Woodland Elf, second place. Oh, she's not up here.
He's dressed up too.
Well,
I was told I can't win anything.
okay. And then the 3 hobbits are tied for third. And the way we're going to do this is first place actually 3 prizes. You choose. And then second place, 2 prizes, which you then get to choose. And then the hobbits each prize each. And then we have, I guess, a couple left over where... Yeah, don't... Jay's book was out there, that's why I put it down. Grab that, grab that. So on that side of the table. And then we'll have a couple left over. If anyone sees something up here.
I just want to mention about the prizes, just so everybody knows. These were all purchased with donations from the faculty and staff on campus, including the panelists, as well as some of the other people helping out here, and other people who couldn't come, but pooled our money and bought things to further inspire your interest in Tolkien. And we hope that you find things that you like here, but we'll let the winners choose. So,
Thank you.